Episode 108, Photography Terms and Abbreviations. Hi, I'm Daniel Grove.
And I'm Nate Gunn, and you're listening to the Visionary Variety Podcast.
In this episode, we're going to be covering some popular photography-related terms and abbreviations that are often misunderstood or confusing to newer photographers. This episode is going to be great if you're a newer photographer or even a videographer. All right, well, let's get to it. Welcome to the Visionary Variety Podcast, where we cover cool stuff like photo, video, film, books, and technology. So switch on your brain and enjoy the show. Okay, let's start off with the first abbreviation, and this is a big one, TFP. That word comes with some baggage. Yeah. So TFP, what does it stand for? Well, it kind of depends on who you ask. It can be interpreted to mean a few different phrases. Most popular would be time for photos, trade for print, time for photo shoot, trade for pictures.
Time for print.
Yeah. So that goes back to the original use of TFP, which is when you were a model in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, generally you would be getting a print from your photographer to use in a physical portfolio. Go figure. the good old days when we actually held photos.
I'm gonna need a copy. Oh yeah, this TFP me. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the trade back then. Was I'll model for you as long as you give me an 8x10, of the headshot or whatever. So these days, TFP is a little different because we're working primarily a digital world. But in my head, TFP stands for Trade for Portfolio. Because I just feel like that makes more sense for everyone involved.
That does. I like that one.
Both members of a TFP photo shoot are getting a portfolio. The photographer is saying, hey, I'm not going to charge you because I would love to have your look in my portfolio. And the model's saying, well, I'm also not going to charge you because I want your photos in my portfolio. So if both members of a TFP agreement, TFP photo shoot are benefiting, then it's good.
I would put this out there because it happened to me. I would just put it in like some form of an email or text form that you can, because I've had friends show up and the lady's like, okay, well, I'll just invoice you. He's like, wait, what?
Yeah, TFP is a sticky situation if you're not very clear with communication. You got to be super transparent. You got to literally say, no money's being exchanged. Do you agree to these terms? No one's paying anyone. Yeah. I'll give you 10 edited photos, no more, no less. And you'll be there on time. You will model for me for, say, an hour. You'll have 2 outfits. Like, you got to be very, very clear on these things.
Yeah, and because it's free, they just, no shade thrown, but I've been a part of and heard the horror stories where people show up like a couple hours late.
So many flakes.
Or only brought like 1 of 2 outfits and they really wanted to shoot the second outfit.
Yeah, when there's no money being exchanged, you'd think that would make things easier. But psychologically, there's less value put on things that don't cost money.
Island time.
Yeah, people, well, it's just a free shoot. It's just a for fun shoot. So I don't have to be there like right on time, or I'm going to leave a little late, or I'm not going to do my hair and makeup for this one because it's not that big.
Or we plan to meet at 6 p.m. But I'll just leave at 6 p.m. from my house. So
don't be that model, or don't be that photographer.
No, don't do that.
So personally, I don't really do TFP anymore these days. I do them occasionally when it benefits me. The thing is, TFP doesn't really benefit me very much anymore because my portfolio is good. Like, I've been doing this thing for 15 plus years, and I've got, I've shot almost everything under the sun that I want to shoot. There's very few things I haven't done yet that would benefit me, marketing wise or promotion wise. So if there's something new that I haven't done, I'll consider it. If there's a new piece of gear I get and I need to test it out or learn it, a new technique, I'll do a TFP for that. So that I'm not, risking it not turning out great for a paying customer. That's why I'll do it for free with a friend of mine, but I don't do it too much because I just don't have time.
Yeah. And the last time I did a TFP, which was, a while back, I got everything ready, showed up, canceled plans for prior things that I wanted because I really wanted to shoot something. Got to the location. It's like, waited there maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Got the call like, hey, I'm not coming. I'm like, no, why?
Yeah. The horror stories of TFP.
So then there is OCF, off-camera flash.
Yippee.
OCF is off-camera flash.
That's generally when you have a radio controller on top of your camera. It goes on your hot shoe. And when you press your shutter button, it sends a signal that exact millisecond to your flash, which is on a light stand, maybe in an umbrella or a softbox. And it triggers your flash like right in time with your photo being taken. And boom, your flash is being triggered wirelessly. It's off camera. It's not on your camera. You can have your flash on camera. It does not look good. Let me just put that on the table. Please don't take pictures of people with your flash.
Paparazzi.
Yeah, don't be that paparazzi photographer. Everyone's washed out, white and flat. There's no depth or anything. Don't do it. Take your flash off your camera, get a wireless control system, and you'll thank me. Because when I started using off-camera flash, my photos got so much better. I love it. It's just, you get depth, you get style, you get drama. It's way, way better. All right, next one is regarding flash and wireless flash. HSS. This stands for high speed sync. So this is a pretty technical term. I'm going to try and break it down as simple as I can because this one causes a lot of confusion online. So high speed sync is a feature that some flashes and strobes have that allows you to light your scene when you're shooting faster than your camera's maximum sync speed. Okay, so let's back up and define that. So what is this maximum sync speed? That is a shutter speed that your camera can shoot at where the entire sensor is exposed to light at one time. So I didn't know this until a few years ago, but the camera sensor is actually covered by two moving curtains. One goes down and exposes the sensor to light, and then the top curtain goes down and covers that. So it's kind of like you got a curtain facing upwards and downwards. They both move open and then close. You got to see a visual online to really understand it. But basically, when you start shooting faster than your maximum sync speed, your sensor is not being exposed to light completely at one moment in time. The shutters, the curtains will actually be closer together. So eventually, if you shoot really fast, let's say 4,000th of a second, that's the super fast shutter speed. The curtains are actually right up next to each other, and there's a tiny slit of light that just scans downward across your sensor, and that's how your sensor is capturing your scene, is in a tiny slit of light that's moving downwards. So if your flash fires during that exposure, you're going to have a small band of light across your photo, not across the entire photo, because it's not hitting your whole sensor at one moment. So high-speed sync kind of goes around that and finds this really creative backdoor where your flash is actually firing in succession, like boom, 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 boom. And as that tiny slit of light moves across your sensor from top to bottom, capturing one single photo, the flash gets through that little gap and hits every section of your sensor really fast, which is just insane. But I actually made an animation, and I'm making a YouTube video for this same episode. I'm basically gonna make a YouTube version on my YouTube channel. You'll see an animation of what it looks like when the shutter speed goes past your maximum sync speed. So if your flash does not have high speed sync, what's going to happen? You're going to go faster than your max sync speed. Let's say you're shooting at 500th of a second. What's it going to look like? You're going to have part of your photo bright, the other part of your photo dark. And about every month, I have someone message me, what's wrong with my flash? What's going on? Like one piece of their photo horizontally is bright. And I said, you need high speed sync. You either don't have it on or your flash doesn't even have that option. So that flash is firing while only part of your sensor is being exposed and the other part is being covered up by the curtain. And therein lies your problem. So high-speed sync is awesome because you can freeze action by shooting really fast shutter speeds. Yeah, high-speed sync, I may have confused half of you. The other half of you probably feel like you've just become enlightened and you finally understand the truth.
So the next term is ISO. It stands for International Standards Organization, who decided it back in the 70s that there should be one unified system to measure like light, the brightness, the sensitivity of film. So ISO refers to the sensitivity in your film as well as sensitivity to light and the brightness signals to your camera sensor. Cool. Most cameras can be set the lowest of 100 all the way up to 256,000 ISO.
And they're getting higher.
It's like seeing in the dark.
Every year there's some new like highest max ISO that's ridiculous. It's in the millions, I think, with some cameras, and that's just crazy.
I wonder what the telescopes, when they take pictures, what they got.
I don't know.
But the higher your ISO, the more film grade you're adding, or I guess these days, digital noise that you're introducing to your final image or product.
Yeah, when you buy film canisters for film cameras, the ISO is on there. It's 400, 600, 200, whatever. So that's just, how bright it is. Like if you're shooting in a dim in the evening or inside, you're going to need a high ISO film, or bring it into the digital world. You're going to have to up your ISO to counteract the fact that you don't have a lot of light available to you. Because you can only, put your shutter speed so slow before you start getting blur. And you can only open your aperture so much to where eventually you're maxed out with your shutter and your aperture, and you got to up your ISO to make your photo brighter. Digital grain in photos because of high ISO is a problem that I've had people write me where they say, my photos are super noisy. And I say, well, send me the photo file. I'm going to look at the settings, because if inside each photo file is the settings that you shot it with. It's called metadata. And I look at it, and sure enough, they were shooting at 3200 ISO. And I'm like, well, there you go. And maybe it was on auto.
Thanks, Lightroom, for that info.
Yeah, maybe they had ISO on auto on their camera and they didn't know, but their camera was bumping up their ISO super high, and that adds a bunch of noise in your photo. Which you can take out some of that in post with noise reduction on Lightroom or in Photoshop,
or Neat Video for like Premiere Pro.
Oh yeah, that cleans it up too. That's cool.
Yeah, the one thing about ISO is like if there's a moment that's happening and you have nothing else, no light, no nothing, just take the photo, capture the image. If it's grainy, it's like one of those moments that you may never get again. Just take it.
That's true.
But if it's like, nope, and it's too much grain, I just know it, and then you walk away from that moment, you may have missed something for that client that may have never been seen again.
And you can always make it black and white later. That's a lazy fix for
when a photo's not right, you make it black and white.
Problem solved. Now it looks like a film photo. All right, we're talking about light sensitivity. Let's talk about the opposite, darkening your photo with an ND filter. So ND,
or sunglasses for your camera.
Yeah, sunglasses for your camera. So ND stands for neutral density, and this is used in reference to filters. So you can buy an ND filter, and there's a bunch of them on the market. There's cheap ones, there's super expensive ones. There's ones that darken your photo just a little bit, maybe by one stop, or you can buy like the heavy duty ones that darken your photo by like 10 stops. And basically an ND filter goes on the end of your lens, or in some cases, the new mirrorless cameras are so cool. You can put an ND filter right in front of your sensor, and then your camera lens goes on top of that.
Yeah, that's super
so cool. I just love that, because you can change out your lenses and your ND filter is still there. But traditionally an ND filter connects on the end of your lens, and it blocks some light, depending on how many stops of, I don't know how to phrase that, how many stops of light your filter's blocking. So why would you want to make a photo darker, you may ask? Well, in some cases, especially with video, you may be shooting outside and you want a very shallow depth of field, which we'll get to later, but you maybe want that really blurry background, blurry foreground, but your subject is perfectly in focus. Now that means you're going to be shooting with, say, f2.8, but that gets a lot of light, and if you're in midday, that's too much light. So you're going to want to stop that down, because you may not be able to change your shutter speed due to video or motion issues, and you may not be able to adjust your ISO. So you can always use an ND filter to drop your total exposure down without changing your camera settings, which is the great, hack of ND filters. There's some really cool ND filters out there. There's some called graduated ND filters, which is basically a gradient. So the top of the filter is very dark. It stops down a lot of light on the top. But as you look down towards the middle and the bottom of the filter, there's nothing there. So it fades off. Why would you use that? That's for skies. So you could use that to basically, trick the exposure in your camera, and you're darkening just the sky of your scene. Now, the cool thing is that this is literally affecting the light coming into your lens. So you can't do this in editing necessarily, not in the same way. And then another cool kind of ND filter is the variable ND filters. These cost a little bit more because they're pretty fancy. But what it is you actually twist the end piece of the filter, and it changes the entire density of the whole filter. I don't know how, polarization or something like that. But if you twist it, to the left, it gets darker. To the right, it gets, brighter, or back to just zero. Those are awesome.
For those that don't know, it's always best to go to the biggest ND filter and then get step down or step up rings for your lenses. You have 5 lenses, they all have different threads. And you're like, that's a lot of ND filters I got to buy. You buy one giant ND filter and buy step down or step up rings, then you have one ND filter, variable, or whichever one you need for all your lenses.
Yes, that is such a money saver right there. So my biggest lens is my wide angle, and I think the thread size on that is 77 millimeters. So that's pretty big. It's like 4 inches across or something like that. But my tiniest lens is probably my 40 millimeter that I got from you, Nate. I don't know the measurement, but it's probably like 50 millimeters, something like that.
You go to your biggest lens and you go, okay, my biggest lens, like for your case, is
Yeah.
77. So I need to buy a 77 ND filter. And then you just buy what's called a step up, or it's a step up and step down rings. And you just screw on, screw on, screw on.
So it allows me to put a 77 millimeter size filter on a 50 millimeter size lens.
So another fun abbreviation that actually I just found out is SOOC. SOOC. Straight out of camera.
I see Sook used a lot on Facebook groups for photography, where they'll post, today's photo shoot, but they'll say SOOC. So these photos are straight out of my card, straight out of my camera. They have not been edited, nothing fancy, no retouching anything. This is just like raw photo. And they usually use that when you've got a really awesome photo that just looks good straight out of camera. You don't even have to, you're going to edit it, but figure of speech, you don't even have to edit it to make it look great. So it's kind of a bragging rights kind of deal. Like, oh, this photo is really cool, right? Well, it's straight out of my camera. Haven't touched it. All right, next is HDR. This stands for high dynamic range, and this refers to the photographic editing technique where multiple exposures of the same image are taken, but with different settings on your camera. So I will use my camera's feature called bracketing, which is going to take 3 or 5 or 7 photos back to back. In burst mode. And the cool thing is that my camera is going to automatically change my camera exposure settings for each photo, going from super dark or underexposed to super bright or overexposed. So it's going to just go do with the shutter. And if you look at the settings, or if you just look at the picture, you'll see the first one's super dark and it gets brighter and brighter to really bright. And somewhere in the middle is a decently exposed photo. So why would you want that? Well, the trick with HDR is that you're increasing the dynamic range of your end result photo by combining the best parts of all 7 or 5 or 3 photos into one, what I call mega photo. So let's pretend we're taking a picture of a building on a horizon. So generally, you're going to get a really white sky if your building looks good, because your building is exposed properly, but the sky behind them is just super bright. Well, you could expose for the sky and get a nice blue sky with details and clouds, but now what happens to the building? Well, now the building's a black silhouette. You often can't get the best of both worlds when you're dealing with a very high dynamic range scene. So one option is you can use HDR. So you set your camera on a tripod, or you hold it super duper still like I do, and I pretend like I'm a sniper, and I put bracketing on, and I hold my shutter button down, and I usually do 5 photos. From darkest to brightest. So then I bring it into a program called HDR FX Pro 2, which is from the NIK collection, and that combines all the photos into one.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's really fast too. So the easiest way to explain what's happening with HDR editing is you're taking the good exposed parts of the darkest photo, which would be what? The sky, right? And then you're also getting the good parts of the super bright photo, which would be, in this case, the building or the shadows. And you're combining them all into one mega photo to where the sky looks blue, the building looks normal, all the shadows and details are there, and there's no way you can capture that in real life. I don't care how good your photographer you are. You can't do what HDR can do with one photo. The HDR photography was super popular like in the early 2000s when Photomatics
overdone too.
Yeah, when Photomatics came out, dude, all the photographers with a little bit of money to blow just got this program and went crazy, and they're just disgusting, unnatural,
it's not
hyper
good.
detailed photos. It's just like, oh, I just got a headache looking at your photo. I do HDR. I try to do a few at every wedding, like of the church, of the venue, things like that. I don't really use it for portraiture because your subject has to be totally still. So not great for people, but perfect for architecture and nature. And I try not to overdo it. And have a good balance of this. Looks somewhat natural, but it also looks kind of cool. Not sure what's going on, but it's a beautiful photo. That's what I aim for.
So the next abbreviation is CC.
Pizza.
Constructed criticism. And we'll take a quick intermission so we can get some pizza. No, but constructive criticism is room to grow. Like better yourself from other viewpoints. Stepping back and learning from those that have been there, done that, have the t-shirt. You learn so much not to do it again or avoid like a big curve like, hey, you don't need to go that way, just go that way.
So the best way to improve your photography skills is to ask for help, right? Reach out to more experienced photographers. That's kind of the key there. And you want to ask for constructive criticism. So post your photo on a Facebook group that allows constructive criticism. I'm sure some may not want those kind of posts. But as long as you're good to do that, you can
Yeah.
say, I'd love some CC on my photo, and you'll get some CC. You'll get some really good people that have some great advice. Hey, you could improve this. You could have changed this angle, use this different lens. This color looks wrong. You also get some jerks. There's a few
Yeah.
there's some bad apples, that just think they're the hero. They think it's their duty to just destroy you and to make you better. But
Just control your emotions. Be
yeah,
vulnerable.
don't let if you're giving constructive criticism, be nice. Don't attack the person. Try to help them. And if
Yeah.
you're receiving constructive criticism, you got to have some tough skin sometimes because there's some people that don't
Oh,
quite
for
know how
sure.
to communicate nicely.
And that's why they say have most of the interaction over the phone or in face to face, because through text there's no
Yeah,
emotion. So they might be
yeah,
sweet and you read it
a
as
jerk.
in mean, emotional, mad. But just because you're not sharing that same like interaction with that person, you're not feeling their, what is that word? Like the vibe they're giving off, I guess is the new agey way of
Mhm.
saying it.
Yeah, so CC is something that can destroy a photographer or it can make you a 10 times better photographer. It depends on who you're getting it from, really.
Yeah, and I've seen some crazy attacks where people are like, I'm done with photography." I'm like, "Gosh, what happened?"
Yeah. Yeah, if you're a new photographer and you don't have thick skin, you're not prepared for these kinds of criticisms, you may get burned out and give up pretty quick. Just don't take it personal.
Yeah,
You got to realize some people out there, bless their little hearts, as we say in the South, they may be saying the right thing, but in the wrong way. They're just not good at
yeah,
helping.
at the wrong
But
time.
but on the flip side of the coin is worth the risk because if you get great criticism from someone who knows what they're talking about and is polite and a good communicator,
Yeah.
man, you can improve your skills real quick with the right advice. All right, next one is BW or B and W. This just means black and white. So really don't have anything else to say to that. It's a black and white photo. All right, the next one is DOF. So this stands for depth of field. And this is basically just the size of the in focus area in front of your camera. So when you take a picture, everything that's in focus within, it could be 1 inch of depth of field, it could be 5 feet, it could
Yeah.
be 20 feet of in focus depth of field. That's your depth of field. How deep is your field that's in focus? So a larger depth of field means more of your scene is going to be in focus, and a smaller
Yeah.
depth of field or a shallower, that's more commonly used, a shallower depth of field
Hmm.
means less of your scene is going to be in focus when you take your picture. Once you've focused, whether you're doing autofocus or
Yeah.
manual. So there's a lot of factors that affect your depth of field that'll make it bigger or smaller. There's actually four
Hmm.
things that will affect it. First is your aperture. If you're shooting at f1.8, that's a very shallow depth of field. If you're shooting at f22, that's about as wide as you can get. However, your photo is going to be super dark, so we've got that trade-off. But if you're shooting at f1.8, your depth of field may be 1 inch. So if you take a picture of someone and if they
Hmm.
move back an inch or forwards an inch, right when you take that picture, or after you focus, they may not be in focus anymore because they've moved out of your depth. They've moved out of their in focus range because you've got such a shallow depth of field. Another thing that affects your depth
Yeah.
of field is distance from your subject. So if I get up in someone's face with my 50 millimeter lens and take a picture, the depth of field is going to be mathematically smaller because I'm so close to my subject that I've focused on.
Hmm.
The opposite is also true. If they are 100 feet away and I take that picture, focused on them 100 feet away and take a picture, my depth of field is
Yeah.
very large because the distance. So as your focus point gets closer to your lens, the depth of field shrinks. As it goes off into the distance, it expands into infinity. So if I take a picture of a mountain, even if I'm at f1.8, my depth of field is going to be pretty large. Third
Yeah.
thing that affects depth of field is your focal length of your lens. So if I'm taking a picture of someone using a 200 millimeter lens, very shallow depth of field. If I take that same photo with a 35 millimeter lens, of course I'm going to have to get much closer to them. That depth of field is going to be much deeper. It's just how it
Yeah.
works. So if you want to take a really cool blurry background portraits of people, like headshots and stuff like that, with a lot of blur in the background, get a longer lens, like 100 millimeter or 200 or 85, something like that. And the
Yeah.
last thing that affects the size of your depth of field is the size of your sensor on your camera. So if you have a full frame camera, if you have a full frame sensor in your camera, there's going to be a smaller depth of field compared to if you had a crop sensor.
Yeah.
So there you go. Just refers to anything that's within that range, that three-dimensional range of in focusness.
So the next one is SSD, solid state drive.
Cool.
Now, personal note, I just put one in my computer. it's a godsend. That thing's amazing. This is like a newer digital storage technology that does not have like one of those spinning discs, but it uses a chip. It's like a really big thumb drive that has all your information on it. So they're lighter, they're faster, and they can handle more wear and tear since there are no moving parts inside like a hard disk in the hard drive.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're a little more expensive though. I think they cost about 2 or 3 times what the equivalent would if you're getting, the hard disk, the HDD version with the disc.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's the payoff. They're worth it because they're way fast.
Oh,
the
for
reading and
sure.
write speeds are like so fast. If you want to load programs fast, if you want to load or save files faster, SSD is definitely the way to go.
Oh, for sure. And just the bare minimum. My computer used to take 30, 45 seconds to turn on. Maybe a minute. Depends like if it was having a good day.
Had his coffee.
SSD came in, turns on. By the time I type my password in, I'm barely pushing the enter button, and it's already opening the screen and everything's done.
It's actually
like that's
it's
amazing.
actually ahead of you in time.
For real, I feel like it. I feel like I'm catching up to it.
You're slower than your own hard drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got 2 hard drives in my laptop, and the main C drive is a SSD. It's not very big. It's only like 256 gigabytes, but it has Windows on it. It has all my programs on it. So stuff opens and updates really quickly. Windows turns on like instantly. It's awesome.
Gosh, and I went to somebody else's computer and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so slow. It was like a minute.
Yeah. All right, next abbreviations is PS and LR. So these are Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Lightroom. So with Lightroom, though, there's a little confusion. This is kind of a different discussion, but I want to get it off my chest so that you won't be confused out there in case you're going to buy Lightroom. Yeah. There's 2 types of Lightroom. There's 2 versions that Adobe makes.
So confusing.
Yeah, it's really dumb. And the way they named them is even worse. So the newer version is Lightroom CC. Well, I shouldn't say newer because the other one is still new. But the other version of Lightroom is called Lightroom CC, which stands for Lightroom Creative Cloud. And it's kind of like the slimmed down Ginny Craig version of Lightroom. There's a lot of features that are missing. It works differently. It's cloud-based. It's more mobile-friendly, not as customizable, kind of like an iPhone. It does stuff for you.
Yeah.
It's like dummy-proof. But the other version, or the original version, is Lightroom Classic, which is the awesome version that doesn't have features missing. I highly advise you, if you're going to get Lightroom, don't get CC. Don't confuse yourself with it.
It's so dumb. Why would they call it CC? If you buy for those that have the Creative Cloud, you're like, oh, that's what I need.
Yeah.
In the opening, you're like, what is this? This is not Lightroom. I hate the update.
Yeah.
But it's not it's the wrong file.
It's even more confusing because the product that Adobe sells called Adobe Creative Cloud or Adobe CC actually contains Lightroom CC and Lightroom Classic. So it's just like they need to get away from the C words. First of all, call it Lightroom Light. I don't know, something else.
What they should have called it is they should have just called it Lightroom Creative.
They should have
forget the cloud.
They should have just not made it because it's stupid.
Well, I guess it's for like those that have like tablets and cell phones.
Yeah, you're right. And I just ticked off a bunch of photographers out there that love Lightroom CC.
All those ones are like, hey, I had it on my iPad. Awesome. Well, first off, you should get a Windows.
First of all, you're wrong. So yeah, different strokes for different folks. I know there's different styles of workflows and different photographers out there. So for some people out there, I'm sure CC is awesome. For me, it's not. It's just not.
For what you do.
Yeah, for what I do and the way I do things, and do not want CC. All right, moving on. All right, next abbreviation is SD. So not to be confused with SSD. An SD refers to an SD card. And interestingly enough, the SD actually means SanDisk. Actually stands for SanDisk, which is the company that originally made these SD cards back in like the 2000, like 99 to 2000 when they first came out. And they were like 16 megabytes. Can you imagine? 16, 32.
I mean that was high end.
Oh yeah. And then the 64 came out.
Now it's like my phone probably couldn't even move.
And then the 64 megabyte card came out, and people were just like, "What are we going to do with 64 megabytes?"
Oh my gosh! Now it's like a pixel of your first photo.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can actually get a 1 terabyte SD card. It's like $250.
What?
Which is essentially a hard drive. But yeah, 1 freaking terabyte. It's
Gosh,
unreal.
I don't know, man. I don't know about that because I feel like I would depend on my hard drive too. I mean, sorry, I depend on my little SD too
Yeah,
much.
what if you lose that little
And I'm like,
thing?
oh, I should have backed that up.
It's a piece of plastic. They can break so easily.
Do you know that they are building metal SD cards now?
Nice. Yes, it's about time.
Yeah.
Military grade SD cards. Something to keep in mind when you're buying SD cards is you need to make sure you can get the right speed for what you're doing.
Oh, for
So
sure.
if you just have a point and shoot or a DSLR and you're taking normal photos, you don't need a really fast card. But if you have a camera that has larger megapixels or shoots really fast, or if you're doing video like 4K and up, then you're going to need a much faster card to keep up with the speed that your camera is writing files to it. So if your camera is trying to send, 10 photos a second to your card may not be able to keep up with that. And it's going to the buffer is going to fill up and it won't let you take any more pictures until the buffer, which is like the
Yeah.
temporary memory, is able to dump those files that it just made into the card. Then you can take more pictures after that, but you have to wait. If you're shooting video and it can't keep up, it's just going to stop and you won't be able to shoot any more video. You can find charts online that show what the different numbers and grades and ratings mean. But I just prefer to get what is it, 95 megabits per second.
Yeah.
That's like
Fast.
one of the fastest, and I think that can handle 4 and 6K.
Yeah.
So you're good. All right, so we're done with the abbreviations. Let's move on to the next section of the episode, which is terms or words. So the first one on my list is speedlight. So speedlight and flash is interchangeable. They're the same thing. A speedlight is generally a less expensive light that you can put on top of your camera on the hot shoe mount, or if you have a wireless radio transmitter or receiver, you can use it wirelessly on a light stand. They're battery powered, generally by AA batteries, but some brands have their own special type of battery. And they're good for close up portraits. They're good for small areas. They can't reach very far as far as like the distance that they can light something up.
Yeah.
And they're not powerful enough to overpower the sun. So if you're shooting midday, forget about it. Your flash is not going to do much of anything.
Yeah.
And also, if you're that guy using your flash at a concert and you're like 200 feet away, also just stop. Because, yeah, you're doing nothing other than annoying people and wasting your batteries.
Oh, it's not nothing. It's something.
Yeah, that's true.
So something you hear photographers talk more about is strobes, and they are a heavy-duty, high-power light that is often used in commercial or studio photography, but they require a lot of power. So you'd have to use like a power bank or plug into the wall. Strobes have like more power than a speed light, like you were saying. If you're just shooting a speed light somewhere 200 feet, you're just going to annoy people. But a strobe is super powerful, which means they can be further away and also light up larger areas. And
Strobes are getting really popular because they're getting smaller,
lighter.
lighter weight, and they have their own batteries. So traditionally, even up to about just a few years ago, most strobes, you had to have a really big battery pack that was literally the size and the weight of a car battery. You had to tote that around with you with cords, and it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But Godox is probably the on the forefront of making affordable, light, and very high powered strobes that have their own battery built into them. You can change them out if you run out, and they're awesome. Like the Godox 600 is a really great, very popular strobe. It's probably 20 times more powerful than a speedlight, maybe 50. I don't know.
Gosh, that's
It's hard to measure that math because they work differently, but. Yeah, I've got my eye personally on the 8200s. They're not quite strobes, but they're more powerful than the speedlight. They're kind of in the middle. And yeah, if you want some really good, powerful lights for overpowering daylight, or you just want to have nothing but, artificial light on your photos, strobes are the way to go. Next term is wide open. So for example, someone might say, I'm shooting wide open, or my style is I like to shoot wide open. What that means is they're setting their aperture or their f-stop of their lens to the widest setting possible or the smallest f-stop. For example, my 50 millimeter f1.8. If I'm shooting at 1.8, I'm shooting wide open. So the benefits of this is a few different things. First of all, you're getting the most light possible in your lens. So f1.8 is, much brighter than f5.6.
Yeah.
So shooting wide open, you're taking advantage of the aperture. You can shoot in low light or dimmer light. You're getting as much light in as you possibly can. You're also going to get a more shallow or smaller depth of field, so more blurry background or foreground, and kind of a sharper, visible focus on your subject. And because of those two things combined, you can kind of get what we call the bright and airy feel if the lighting is right. Like if you're shooting at sunset or maybe in some, semi-shaded sunny day lighting, you can get this really nice, romantic, glowy, airy feel. And it's kind of some people's thing. I like it when I can get it right. But yeah, shooting wide open is fun, but there's a few drawbacks too, such as the shallow depth of field. You can't shoot, a lot of people. You maybe just one person wide open. If you got a group, don't do that because someone's
Yeah.
going to be outside that focus area, and they're going to be soft or not sharp. So
Yeah.
it's just really a good technique for solo portraits.
And that's shooting wide open, daytime, sunlight, normally when indies play a big factor.
Good way to connect to the previous words. So yeah, you definitely need an indie filter if you're shooting wide open with video, because your shutter speed at video would be, maybe 30th of a second or 60th of a second, and that's pretty bright. So you'll
Doesn't look
definitely
good.
need an indie filter.
So another term that you hear a lot, full frame. Basically, it's a large camera sensor that allows for less noise as well as higher dynamic range. I've heard it a lot of different ways. You get more fill, more real, the bigger picture.
Hmm.
No puns intended. But they're normally found in professional cameras.
Yeah.
So it kind of comes to hurt your wallet a little bit. But man, when you get that right camera, ooh, it's so pretty.
Yeah, I upgraded to the Canon 6D a few years ago, actually about 5 years ago. And it was the cheapest full frame that Canon offered at the time. And I definitely saw an improvement in my image quality. And other things are different too, because your lenses that you're used to on a crop sensor are
Yeah.
now different visibly, different focal length effectively with a full frame. So for example, if I was shooting a 50 millimeter on my crop sensor, and then I put that same 50 millimeter on my full frame, now it seems much wider. And it's weird because
Yeah.
it's like, wait, my 50 millimeter is now like a 35. There's a few lenses you can't buy for certain cameras. Like I
Yeah.
can't buy an EFS lens for my camera because my camera is EF.
Yeah.
And what that means is the very last glass element of the lens that faces into the camera sensor is
Mhm.
actually protruding inwards, like maybe a centimeter or less.
Yeah.
And that's just too close. And the mirror that inside my full frame camera will go up when I take a picture. It'll hit that piece of glass. And that's not good. So yeah, you
No.
can't use an
No.
EFS lens on an EF mount because that danger of collision of pieces. At least with my camera. So lenses that you're used to using on crop sensor, if you use those same lenses on a full frame, everything's going to be wider by about 1.6 times wider. So that's kind of weird math. But basically, if I shoot with a 50 on a crop, then I put that 50 on a full frame and I take the same picture, it's going to look like a 35 on the crop, the equivalent. Because the sensor is bigger. So it captures more of that incoming cone of image light that's coming into the blackness of the middle of the camera onto the sensor. It's larger. It's like almost 1.5 inches wide, whereas a
Yeah.
crop is like less than an inch wide. So I'm getting more field of view. Therefore, I'm getting a wider field of view. Therefore, everything looks a little bit wider. On a crop sensor, a 100 millimeter photo will look like an 85 on full frame. Just a tiny bit wider. And like a 50 turns into a 35, and so on and so forth. So we just talked about full frame. Crop sensor is kind of the opposite. We already talked about that a little bit, but it's just a smaller camera sensor found mostly in entry-level cameras, as well as some good cameras. I mean, just because it has a crop sensor does not make it a bad camera.
Yeah.
And it does not mean you can't use it professionally. Don't listen to that junk out there that says only full professionals only use full frame. It's not really true. Crop sensors have their place, and they have some benefits, such as being tighter. You can get much closer in. Well, not a lot, but get a little bit closer in. They're generally more lightweight. They're cheaper. There's some benefits to
Lighter.
crop sensor. Yeah, they're lighter. That's good. That's always a good thing. My first camera that I bought with professional camera was the Canon Rebel XSI, and of course that was a
Ooh.
crop sensor. I used the heck out of that thing, and then I upgraded to the
Yeah.
60. Then I upgraded to the 60.
We've been talking about full frame crop sensor, and Daniel actually brought up a point about being tighter. Well, in both full frame and crop, something you hear a lot, it's called compression. So compression is the amount of visible compact that your lens will apply to your image. Lenses with a long focal length, such as 100 millimeter or 200 millimeter, they will have more compression than a smaller focal length like a 35 millimeter or a 50. So the compression draws focus to the subject and can be used to hide features in your scene. So the higher the compression also means the smaller depth of field.
Yep.
Which we talked about in other situations as well,
Mm-hmm.
which can add more of that bokeh or bokeh, whatever you
I
want
think
to
it's
call
bokeh.
it.
I want to say bouquet, like a bouquet of flowers, but I think it's bokeh.
One conversation you can have to trigger somebody is ask them how they say it.
Yeah, so compression is a really key aspect of good portraiture. When you're doing solo portraits, you want to go for a compressed look. It just has a really great aesthetic to it. That's why that 70 to 200 is so popular for portraits, as well as the 85 millimeter. That's super popular too. Also more affordable, but getting that close in look that just focuses on nothing but their body, their face, their expression. Generally, I'm thinking of like a waist up shot or even a chest up, like a headshot. Those are really great to have a high compression lens with a long focal length. And it does get some really nice bokeh in the background, and it just makes you look at them. You can't look in the background and get distracted because what's in the background? Blurry, blobby lights. There's nothing to look at. It's just blur. And generally, that's a great look for most portraits.
Yeah.
I've got a 100 millimeter lens, which is actually a macro lens. So I
Yeah.
use it for headshots. And when I really need just a great compressed solo portrait of someone, I always go to my 100 millimeter 2.8.
Gosh, you don't understand how many times I've had to explain this to people. They take a photo and they're like, "Where are the bubbly Christmas light looks?" I'm like, okay.
Well, there's no Christmas lights.
Wait a second.
They don't just appear magically.
Yeah. That normally has to do with like lights
Yeah.
and LEDs and all that fun stuff.
All right. Well, next term is copyright. Now, this is a touchy, triggery topic, man.
And we did an episode on this.
Yeah.
If you really want in depth, go back and find the copyright. Gosh,
I can find it. I don't know what number it is. So you're just gonna have to go searching for
Type
it.
in the Visionary Variety Podcast copyright. I'm sure you'll find it.
I'll try to keep it as simple as possible and not turn this into a whole episode about that again. But whoever has the copyright over anything, could be an image, could be a song, anyone that has the copyright on anything basically has ownership of that thing. They can sell it, they can duplicate it, they can license their design or their song or their image to anybody else for certain uses. They can even edit it and do whatever they want because they have the copyright to that thing. Guess what? Any picture that I take, I have the copyright of. By default, by the law in America, I have copyright of the images that I capture.
Yeah.
And if a client pays me for a family photo shoot, guess what? They don't have copyright, but they paid you for the photos. Yeah, they didn't pay for the copyright though. That would be ridiculous.
Boy.
Why do they need full copyright of photos? Are they going to sell, manipulate, and publish their family photos? No. So what are they paying for? They're paying for a general use of the photos, which is online viewing, personal viewing, printing if I allow them, which I don't anymore, and so on and so forth. But they do not have ownership or copyright of my images. So if you use something you do not have the rights to use, then you are committing what's called copyright infringement, and that is illegal. And if I can prove that I have copyright of something, then I can sue you in court. I can get what's called damages and some other things like that. But that's when things get expensive and nasty. I've never had to do that, thankfully.
Yeah, you just kindly ask them to take it off or stop.
And hope that they're also kind and polite.
Yeah.
I was alerted by one of my clients that an image I took of the client was in some random YouTube video for Fortnite. It was a Fortnite cosplay photo I did.
Yeah.
And we all know how popular Fortnite is. So some dude took it upon himself to steal my photo as well as about 200 or 300 other cosplay photos of Fortnite cosplayers, made a 10-minute video collage of them, and had 2 million views.
Wow.
So I'm thinking this video is, what's it called? Commercialized or monetized, right?
Probably. Did he monetize it?
Yeah, it was monetized. That's the word. So it was monetized because there was ads, and this guy was making bank, probably $3,000 or $4,000 a month on just this video. And my picture was a part of his money, and I didn't even know about it. He did not ask for permission. He did not pay for rights. So what did I do? I did the YouTube takedown notice, which blocks the video until further notice, until I let him bring it back or he pays me or whatever. And he wrote me, he's like, "Dude, you blocked my video, man. What's up?" I was like, "You stole my photo. What's up with that?" And he said, "What can I do to, have you unblock it?" I was like, "Well, pay me $300. He sent me the money and I unblocked the video.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's copyright for you. And YouTube is pretty good with copyright. That's why they don't let you use copywritten music in videos, because it's copywritten and you have not paid the rights for it.
So speaking of things that were like, oh, so good. Prime lenses. Oh, I love these things. But they're normally pretty expensive. I'm not going to lie. There's some that I'm like,
I don't love paying for them.
Yeah, no. I love them. I love what they do. I love the image that they get, but very expensive, but better quality. I think I held the 85 millimeter in my hand. I'm like, this thing is heavy. Most of them come with a wider aperture, which is awesome. if you really
Yeah.
want that bokeh or bokeh or whatever you want. But there's
Bokeh.
been many countless times that I've heard and handed my camera off to somebody and they're like, where's the zoom ring? I'm like, I don't know, try to figure it out.
They're twisting the focus ring. Like, it's not zooming. You can't. Lens is
Yeah.
broken.
And so I'm like, well, you really want to know what the zoom button is? They're like, yeah.
Uh,
Like your feet. Your
look
feet
down.
are the zoom. You walk forward, you walk back, you walk left, you walk
Zoom with
right.
your feet. Yeah.
So, but don't get me wrong. If you can find even old glass, if you can get an adapter that are some prime
Mhm.
lenses, I have a couple friends that are actually using like 50-year-old glass,
Wow.
and
So
that
cool.
stuff is so nice. And
They don't make them like they used to.
no,
All right, next on the list is rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds is a guide to compose better photos. So basically, let's visualize this. So pretend you've got your camera up to your eye or up in front of you. You're taking a picture. Now let's divide your screen, or any photo you're looking at for that matter,
yeah,
divide it into 9 squares, exactly like tic-tac-toe, just a little bit wider if you've got your screen horizontal, right? So evenly spaced out, we've got 9 squares, 3 on top, 3 in middle, 3 in the bottom. And consequently, there's lines. There's 2 lines going vertically, 2 lines going horizontally. Now, these lines, that's the rule of thirds right there. You want to line up your subject either smack dab in the center of your photo, which would be in between the 2 vertical lines, or you want to put their face on an intersection of 2 lines on the left, left, or bottom right.
yeah,
So it's just kind of like a guideline to help you put things off center, but not too far off center, but also not too close to the center where it's confusing. And when you use the asymmetry of the rule of thirds, you get a nice balance to the photo because there's threes, your subject is on the first third, then there's 2/3 of empty space or of other subjects, and your eye is kind of drawn from the most important, most noticeable point of interest to the other points. And that's generally a good thing. You want your viewer to start at one point and then look at like one other spot or a third other spot after that. But rule of thirds is a lifesaver when you're learning composition and learning to take better photos. I encourage you all to look it up, master it, think in the rule of thirds with your eyes.
yeah.
And a lot of cameras, including software, can do an overlay on the screen while you're shooting. You can actually put the rule of thirds over your frame and your camera.
So helpful.
Yeah, when you're starting off and it's not, first nature, figure out how to do that in your camera, and you'll thank me in a few years when you're taking
I
great
mean,
photos.
shoot, I've been shooting cameras for a while, and I still use it just because I'm
Yeah,
so focused in the moment, and I just having that
sure.
display, I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah, you have to think less if it's already on
yeah.
there.
So the next term is noise, not like you're being loud. Digital noise in your image is an artifact generated by electrical currents in your camera's sensor. Ooh, did I sound like a scientist there? Higher ISO settings will increase the noise in your image.
Yep.
But in different softwares like photo editors and video editors, you have noise removal. And
hmm
in most photo editors, it's noise removal. And in video, it's normally neat video, but
Yeah.
same thing. So yeah, digital noise, like I've told people before, I'm like, hey, like I said, the higher you throw your ISO, you're going to get this little grainy dancing ants all over the place. But if there's a moment that you're trying to catch that you're worried you're going to miss, get the image, see if you can clean it up later. But your
hmm
client or whoever yourself will be more happy that you have the image or the video. And
Yeah.
a little bit of noise is not going to hurt anybody's feelings.
Now, I get this a lot from people who just buy a camera or they're new to DSLRs, new to professional photography, is the noise and the grain. They're like, how do I fix this? Why are my images look so disgusting?
Yeah.
And it's often because their ISO is on auto. And so when they're shooting in a darker scene, that maybe they don't have their settings properly set or they don't have any additional light. The camera's like, oh, this is a dark photo. Let's bump up that ISO to 12,000. And boom, they got green everywhere, and they don't know it because it's kind of a hidden, covered up auto function that most cameras don't display the ISO too obnoxiously.
Yeah.
They're all about the shutter and the aperture, but the ISO is often smaller. And if that thing is on auto, then be prepared. Now, newer cameras have a cool feature where you can limit the ceiling of the auto ISO, so you can tell it, hey, don't go higher than 8,000 or don't go higher than 3,200.
Yeah.
And that's a nice kind of safety feature where you can leave it on auto, but it won't go higher than, whatever you set.
Yeah.
I am constantly impressed by Lightroom's ability to remove noise. It's honestly better than what I've found in Photoshop.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the luminance and the color noise removal in Lightroom is amazing. If you're dealing with that, check that out in the detail panel.
Just be careful because you can make your image look super soft and super fluffy.
Yeah. Yeah, there is some level of grit and grain that is natural to a photo that helps the detail. If
Yeah.
you remove too much noise, the artifacts are going to go away, but so will some of your detail that's just naturally in your photo. So you're going to lose some sharpness and some fine detail that you're
I
definitely going to want.
I guess to better imagine, think of a painting and then you went over with like a little napkin of water and smeared it. It's kind of what
Ooh,
you're doing to your details in some areas. You're just making
yeah.
it so soft it looks like someone like smudged it.
All right, next term on the list is retouching. Speaking of which, retouching is just a collective set of different techniques used to smooth out skin, fix stray hairs, clean up the scene, and even fix clothing imperfections on a model or on your subject.
Yeah.
These are, of course, done in editing and posts, most popularly in Photoshop, as well as a few other side programs that specialize in retouching. But let's face it, Photoshop's the real deal. Just kidding.
And you make it so seamless. Just gosh.
Yeah, a good retoucher is able to fix blemishes and smooth out skin in a way that's not noticeable unless you saw it before. You're like, wow, that person, no wonder they look so beautiful. It's because they're fake. But retouching really is an art. There's people that just do retouching, like they're hired by other photographers
They
to
make
do the
so much
retouching.
money.
Yeah, because it's a craft. It's a
Yeah.
very specialty type job that requires special skills, and it takes a lot of time that most photographers don't want to take the time to do, and they definitely don't want to take the time to learn it. So, retouching, yeah, it's kind of become a big thing, and we kind of use the term photoshopping interchangeably with the
Yeah.
word retouching now. People will say, "Do you will you be photoshopping my pictures?" What they really mean is retouching, fixing my skin, making me lose a few pounds, stuff like that.
No, I'm not. Sorry.
You didn't pay for that. You got the basic package where you actually look like yourself, God forbid. All right, next term is bokeh or bouquet or buki. No, just kidding. No one actually says that last one. Um,
No, I will.
but now you'll make it a thing. 2020. So bokeh is actually a Japanese word that literally translates to blur. Go
Wow.
figure. That's what it's
So
all about.
simple.
So bokeh is not just those blurry blobs of Christmas lights in the background, although that's generally what people think of or refer to when they use the
Oh,
word.
shucks.
It means so much more. So bokeh is the area of a photo, often the background, that is so blurred that the details become indistinguishable. And often you can say, this lens has better bokeh than this lens. What are they talking about? Well, they're talking about the fine details of how things are blurred. Some lenses
Yeah.
have 9 blades in the aperture. Some have better quality glass and other elements that make better blurring. You can even find comparisons of similar lenses but different qualities, and you can compare the bokeh. You may have never thought of doing that, but it's a thing.
Yeah.
People will buy a lens because it has great blurring
Yeah,
bokeh.
I've known people that buy a lens, take it out into like the night downtown, throw the focus way out so they can just see the bokeh.
I love doing that. It's good for backgrounds too.
Oh yeah, and they're just like, oh, it's so great. I'm like,
Yeah,
it's just
creamy
blurry
smooth.
bubbles.
Right? Yeah, it's so strange. Okay, next word on my list is composite. So, a composite is a digital photo that's made up of two or more, sometimes much, much more than two, digital photos combined to make one seamless scene using Photoshop or other similar editing programs.
Yeah,
Oftentimes, composites are made to look realistic and to fool your eye or to tell a very dramatic story, or in many cases, to show something that would be outright dangerous or just completely impossible to
yeah,
do at a real photo shoot.
like compositing somebody into swinging like Spider-Man or
Yeah.
scaling a real size building when in
Mm, mm,
reality they were just a foot off the
yeah.
ground.
Yeah. Or walking through a burning house, things like that.
Yeah,
So this is done using a bunch of different editing techniques such as blending layers, masking, all kinds of color and lighting adjustments to make
yeah,
images match together. Because if you grab two completely different photos taken at different times, different equipment, different lighting, different photographers, those photos are generally not going to blend together well. But a
hmm,
good compositor that knows their ins and outs of editing, they should be able to make most photos blend together well. There's
seamless.
some things that just can't be done,
Yeah,
but you'd be surprised at what a good compositor can do with pictures and making them blend together. I do quite a bit of compositing with my cosplay photos, and it's interesting because I never know if a composite is going to take 1 hour or 10. And it's crazy to spend 10 to 20 hours on one single photo.
Yeah.
But when it's done, you know that photo could never have been made otherwise.
Yeah.
And you also know that no one else has this photo in the world, or in my case, I hope nothing even like it. Um,
Yeah.
that's always my goal. So I love compositing, although it is a time sucker, and I'm trying to find ways to make it cost effective and to work it into my
Yeah.
packages because
I enjoy watching your time lapse videos when you do
oh,
them.
they're fun. Yeah, if you want to see some composites being put together or the different layers that make up a composite, go to my YouTube channel, Daniel Grove Photo, and you'll find what I call edit lapses, where it's a time lapse of me editing a photo. Other times I'll show kind of a walkthrough of all the layers adding up and
Yeah.
what they equal. And those are fun too. I have had easily 50 layers in some composites. It gets
Gosh.
crazy, so crazy.
So one of my favorite terms back
Mhm.
to lenses is the macro.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, I've never had the privilege of actually shooting, but something having like a really high macro lens is just like it's so good. And you
Mm,
get sometimes you get bokeh, you get
yep.
depth of field, like everything comes into factor. But macro comes from the Greek, but it means large, and that's very true. There's been times that I've watched others, and they're like inches away from a subject, and then I see the
Yeah.
after. I'm like, that's just unreal.
Huge. Yeah, the
So
fact that macro means large, but you're taking pictures of small things confused me for a long time until I realized that it's a relative largeness because when you look at the picture, what's large in the picture? The small thing is made large.
yeah,
Like the eyeballs of a fly are now taking up an entire 24 by 36 print, that's large. So macro refers to making or enlarging small things on your photo. I love that 100 millimeter because I can fill up almost a full photo with a set of wedding rings and just get some really creative angles. We get that great bokeh, and that's what I love with macro photography. Also, it's fun with nature too.
oh yeah. If you want to see something fun, someone out there made a macro lens with a light on the end of it, and it's a little skinny tube,
Oh
and they
yeah,
push it through like chip bags, and they push it through
uh,
paper, and they put
so
it's
crazy.
so cool. It's like $1,000+, but I would love to have one because it's so unreal. It just doesn't even look right.
Yeah, does not look like a lens. The end of it is like 2 centimeters wide. It's
Yeah,
weird.
and it has little lights on it
It's
because
like a vacuum.
yeah, I thought it was. It looks like something you would see in a science lab or something
Mhm.
you would see on the end of a vacuum cleaner. But
Yeah.
it's an expensive little piece of glass that it fits around into your mount, and then it just a tube that's probably about a foot long.
Yeah, so that lens is called the Venus Optics
Ooh,
Laowa
cool name.
24 millimeter f14. Ugh, f14.
24.
Yeah, 24 millimeters. So the end of it,
What?
it's a wide angle macro lens, which is like unheard of. But because of the construction and the proportions of the whole tube, I don't know how it works, but it does. But it's f14. That's pretty
So
weird
literally, I could walk up to you and put the tube like
on
inside
my
somebody's mouth
face.
and then pull out and it looked normal. Like what the heck? No wonder it doesn't look real because it just does these like weird shots that you can't
Yeah.
really get with one lens.
Yeah, it's $1,500.
Oh, that's it.
That's crazy. Well, I'm looking at the Pentax version. They're probably all pretty similar, but
I'm sure.
oh, I found it for $1,000 on B&H Photo Video. So there you
Oh
go.
wow.
All right, next term and the last phrase on the podcast today is face swap.
Scary.
Not the movie. Wait, was that a movie? Oh, that was Face Off, where they did do a face swap. But
Yeah.
uh, that's for another episode. We should do a Face Off review. That would be so funny.
That would be.
Nicolas Cage. So face swapping is the editing technique by which you can take someone's face off of one photo, say when they were smiling, you take that good
That's
face and you paste it onto the photo where they were picking their nose
oh
or
gosh.
not looking at the camera, which they never do. There's always someone not looking. So yeah, you get the good face, put it on the bad photo. Boom, you got a perfect photo where all 28 family members are all smiling.
And do you use this often?
Yes. Well, depending on what the shoot is. If there's children or large families involved, yeah, there's bound to be at least 1 or 5 face swaps.
Gosh.
I recently had a client, I did a large family photo shoot and they got their photos back. They came back and they said, "Can you put my dad's face on these 9 photos? Because he doesn't smile. He's not a smiling dad. I don't understand those dads." But, no judgment. Everyone has their own way of showing they're happy. I guess this guy just showed it by not smiling.
And did you do it?
I did. I should have charged him extra, but I didn't. So I plopped this dad's face on one slight smirk he had in one photo. I'll put it on like 10 different photos, and it lined up. The perspective was right.
That's funny.
The lighting was perfect, so it looked good. Now, if you don't have the right perspective or lighting, it's going to look bad. So just be aware. All right, well, that's it for this episode. A little bit of a long one, but I think it was worth it. And if you made it this far...
Just slow clap. Slow clap.
Well, I hope you learned something from this episode. If you did, write us and let us know which terms were new to you, or maybe some terms you had confused. You thought was one thing and you were wrong. Let us know. We'd love to hear back from you guys. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week.
Bye-bye.
If you like this show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find our previous episodes there and listen whenever you want. We love to hear from our listeners, so if you have any comments or suggestions for future episodes, you can reach us at tvvpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and have a great week. That is the coolest robot ever.